shouldn't have named Dion. You shouldn't have named Jimbo, especially if you say the guy worked for you, man. That's not good. That's bad.
On today's Throwdown Thursday edition of the Odd Coaches Podcast, Dr. Adams and Coach Francis provide an in-depth review of Nick Saban's NIL comments, discuss changes to NCAA college football conference championships, analyze conference financial data, and share their thoughts on supporting student-athlete mental health. Welcome to today's show. Dr. Keith Adams is the president of the CKA Save Project, a nonprofit organization designed to assist student athletes and the people who work with them through educational and professional development. He is a career academic and athletic leader with close to 30 years of experience on the high school and college levels. He has won numerous championships and epitomizes professionalism. Coach Mike Franchise Francis is one of the most successful football and basketball coaches in the state of Maryland. He too is a career academic and athletic leader with close to 30 years of experience on the high school and college level and is self-admittedly a little rough around the edges. Both men have mentored countless student athletes, teachers, and coaches using their unique methods and approaches to leadership. Both men also share a unique and special friendship that was cultivated often through their unique perspective of life and leadership. Dr. Adams through his extensive educational background and Coach Francis through his life experiences. Can these two men share a podcast without driving each other crazy? Welcome to the Odd Coaches Podcast.
Greetings and salutations and welcome to the Odd Coaches Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Keith Adams, and with me today is my tag team partner. Tried out something new this week, Mike. The Mr. Wrestling 2 to my Magnum TA in Mid-South Wrestling.
Hey,
the icon, the showstopper, the main event, and the reason why we are here, Coach Mike Francis. And Coach, all episodes this week, there was some tie-in to something that happened to me when we did the Tuesday episode. It was too much bourbon, and bourbon's not your friend. Wednesday, we want to talk about Sasha Banks and Naomi and their contract walkout. But today, we want to talk about coaching and mentors. And one of the best angles I've ever seen was in the mid-'80s, and Mr. Wrestling 2 was Magnum TA's coach. And he was teaching them and trying to get them better. And then, of course, in true wrestling fashion, Mr. Wrestling 2 turned heel on Magnum and said, I did everything, and you never appreciated it, and blah, 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 which takes us to the start of our show. On today's episode, we're going to do an in-depth review of Nick Saban's busy week, talk about changes to the NCAA College Football Conference Championships, conference financial data, and that conference financial data made me think about having a discussion on student-athlete mental health, which we will take extremely seriously, but it was based on the conference financial data that I will share with you. But before we do all of that, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, sir. How you doing?
Man, I'm feeling awesome. Shout out to, again, Ajua and Merv.
Are you feeling awesome?
Man, that was a wonderful wedding. Two wonderful people. And Fowler and Campbell and I are feuding because bourbon is not Coach Adams' friend.
Nah, not this morning. Not no morning.
Oh, no, I'm good. No, I'm not that. I'm too cheap for that. All right, let's jump right into Nick Saban.
I could cost a lot less, right?
Free. I gave a tip, though. I told the boy I tended to get out of the neighborhood fast. So here's a tip.
That's not good.
All right, so Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher. Let's set the tone for this. Texas A&M signed five-star prospects in the 2022 ESPN 300, with 20 of them ranked in the top 150. This class, Mike, on paper, is widely considered the top-ranked group in the modern era of recruiting. Nick Saban commented that Texas A&M, and I quote, bought every player in this recruiting class. Jimbo Fisher, who served as Saban's offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at LSU for 4 years, cast his own accusations against Saban. Jimbo Fisher said Saban's comments were despicable despicable
Mm-hmm.
a number of times during a quickly assembled 9.5 minute news conference. He also said, "We never bought anybody. No rules were broken. Nothing was done wrong. It's a shame that you've got to sit here and defend 17-year-old kids and their families and Texas A&M because we do things right. We're always going to do things right. We're always going to be here, and we're doing a heck of a job. It's despicable that a reputable head coach can come out and say whatever he wants to say
Mm-hmm.
when he doesn't get his way. The
Mm-hmm.
narcissist in him doesn't allow these things to happen. It's ridiculous when he's not on top. And here's the go home, sir. Some people think they're God. Go dig into how God did his deal. You may find out a lot of things you don't want to know. We build him up to be the czar of football. Go dig into his past or
Mm-hmm.
anybody that's ever coached with him. You can find out anything you want to find out and what he does and how he does it. It's despicable. To quote Daffy Duck, it's despicable. So, what are your initial thoughts before we go into Saban digging in deeper?
I don't like it. I really don't like it. I had all the respect in the world for Saban and what he does for his consistency and for winning. And it's hard to remain on the top. You and I both know that as coaches, and to do it for such a long period of time over the college that he did, this is very it's not good. It's not good at all. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I
So,
think
what
it's
about
like
Jimbo's response, though? Are we
I
good
love
with
it.
Jimbo
I
response?
love Jimbo's
Okay.
response. Ain't no fun
Okay.
when the rabbit got the gun, is what my father used to say. Everybody run in the hood, run in the woods trying to shoot rabbits, but what happened when that rabbit got a pistol in his hand and your ass come in there? You don't like him firing back. So that's what this is to me. Ain't no
Okay.
fun when the rabbit got the gun. And I
All
always
right.
say, and for him to even mention Dion too,
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. We're
I don't want
walking.
that. No,
We're walking. So, so,
no.
so Saban dug in deeper. Saban said that Alabama players made $3 million doing it the quote right way last year, and that only 25 players are able to leverage name, image, and likeness opportunities. To
Mhm.
quote Saban, I mean, we were second in recruiting last year. He said to a group of local business leaders, A&M was first. A&M bought every player in the team, made a deal for name, image, and likeness. We didn't buy one player, all right, but I don't know if we're going to be able to sustain that in
Mhm.
the future business. More and more people are doing it. It's tough.
Mhm.
So, what he said and who he said it to was where I was on Saban's issue. He said it to a bunch of people who could provide him financial stakes
Of course,
in terms of helping his program out. So,
that's what Dion
yeah.
said.
So now let's go to prime time. Saban also signaled out Jackson State's in his comments, saying that the school paid Travis Hunter, five-star prospect who flipped his commitment from Florida State and signed with the HBCU during the early signing period. Jackson State's coach Deion Sanders denied the rumor. And in an interview with Anscape, and if you don't listen, look at Anscape's articles, folks, do yourself a favor and start.
Hmm.
That they do a very good job. You can see that on ESPN's website, and then go to the left side. You'll see Anscape, formerly known as the Undefeated. Dion said, "I don't make a million. Travis ain't built like that. Travis ain't chasing a dollar. Travis is chasing greatness. Travis and his family don't get down like that. They never came to us in search of the bag." Dion must listen to the show. They're not built like that. This kid wants to be great. Any thoughts on Primetime's response?
I, I I think it was classic prime time. I think it's him telling the truth. But I think part of what's going on with the kid is that um um it's too much of the people expecting the bag. And when you have someone, if this kid's like Dion says, he's definitely in a small percentage of kids and parents who aren't looking for the bag. So, maybe Alabama offered him the bag and he turned the bag down. That's the way I look at it. So you only get mad and say a kid's getting paid when you didn't offer enough or they didn't accept your offer. That's the way I look at it. No one who gets the kid is complaining about how much money they got Or they're not complaining about how they got him or which alumni made sure to secure the deal, whose mama moved to what city after they. Now, come on, man, let's be honest with it. Now, how many cruises they went on in the summer? Like, nobody say nothing about that. Nobody, not when they're the one winning. The only people who complain is the people whose package wasn't good enough. You know what I mean? And when it comes to the
100%,
Deion
sir.
Sanders version, I thought they said lions don't worry about the opinion of sheep.
hmm
So if Nick
So
Saban was the true lion, like I lost a lot of respect for him for this. This some soft stuff. This
yes,
is really soft. This is really soft. This is weak. This is coward talk. Like this is some internet Twitter beef stuff that people do. So nobody said, nah, I don't like this at all.
all right. So in true 21st century fashion, once the heat came, Nick Saban said, "My bad." So he reached out to both Jimbo
Oh, the hell with
Fisher,
them.
and Deion Sanders, wanting to apologize
Nah, we don't want to hear
for
that.
mentioning their specific schools and for any suggestions that they were cheating to get players. But Saban didn't back down from his stance that paying high school players under the guise of NIL to attend a certain school was bad for college
You
sports.
know what he doing.
Look, I should have never singled anybody out, and I wasn't saying that either one of those schools did anything wrong. I didn't intend it to mean that they were buying players, but more that you're able to buy players. Fisher said Saban called him, but he hadn't answered. Not going to. We're done. Um, Fisher said, "You can
How you
call
didn't
me
mean to?
anything you want, but you can't call me a cheat. I don't cheat and I don't lie." And then, of course, Saban came back and said, "Jimbo can say what he wants to say. We've known each other a long time. He worked for me and he's a very good coach." I said it wasn't my intention, but I don't take things personally.
Two things can
Um,
be true.
and Saban said, before I get your response, he's had several football and basketball coaches call him and say they agree with him. What say you, sir? Should he accept his apology? Should
No,
Dion accept his
no,
apology?
no. I'm not. I'm not accepting none of that. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear your apology now. You put us out there. And like Dion said earlier, if you saw him, he went live immediately on the I Am Athlete. Shout out to I Am Athlete podcast. He went live immediately and said, I can't hold him against him because he's speaking to his donors. He's trying to raise up money. I wish he didn't have to. This is mine, not Dion. End quote of
Mhm.
Dion. I wish he wouldn't have to use them to do that because that really that mars those guys. But like this some I don't know how else to say it. There's some false news stuff to kind of drum up your supporting cast or your and drum up your voters or the people who are supporting you. So now all these donors got to come out with more money to try to compete against Texas A&M or get jobs for its players. That's what it is. But you still shouldn't have named Dion. Shouldn't have named Jimbo. Especially if you say the guy worked for you, man. That's not good. That's bad.
Well, to use the political climate, you got to rally your base, is what
That's
they
what I
say in
was.
politics.
See, that's why you the
Um,
doctor.
so here's the administrative response because we all have bosses. So no matter what, they report to somebody. So Texas A&M, Texas A&M athletic director Ross Bork said he learned of Saban's comments, spoke to Fisher, and he said the following: we're being accused of using NIL to induce players, which is against NCAA rules, which is against Texas state law. So that's why we're so defensive because we're not being accused of having all our players on our roster, which is all permissible. It's, oh, there's only one reason why they're doing this. That's the part where Jimbo's emotional. He hasn't talked to anybody at Alabama and doesn't know what this exchange will mean to their relationship with the Clemson Tide going forward. And of course, the conference gets involved. Greg Sankey, commissioner of the SEC, issued public reprimands to both Fisher and Saban for violating the conference rules of ethical conduct. The quote is: the membership of the Southeastern Conference has established expectations for conduct and sportsmanship that were not met. Public criticism of any kind does not resolve issues created, and it creates a distraction. We need to work together to find solutions, and we will focus on that in our upcoming SEC spring meetings. Any thoughts before I share just a few of mine, sir?
How do we get a pass to that SEC spring meeting? That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see.
Well,
That's wrong.
Heather Dinich will be there, and I follow her.
Yeah.
So here's the deal, Mike, and tell me what you think of my thoughts here. Nick Saban, 70, will be 71 years old this season. He's got enough talent to win a national championship. He, like many other coaches, a little bit north of 60, really got a problem with a lot of how college
Hmm.
sports is going.
Hmm.
Jimbo's in his mid 50s. Dion's in his mid 50s, and they're both adapting fairly
Hmm.
well to the new environment. And Lincoln Riley is younger than them, and he's in sunny California.
He getting it.
Uh, so a lot of this to me is noise. And Nick's on his way out, and
Hmm.
no matter what he did, he got 7 natties. He
Can't do
got
that though.
7 natties.
I don't care how many you can't
So
do that.
in terms of him caring what the general pop thinks,
No, man.
he's not going to care that much. But, and this is my opinion, he and Dion are legitimately friends. And he said, "Dag, I
Not
messed
my
up
friend.
my friend."
Ain't no,
Again, he and Dion are or were legitimately friends. So he was like, "Yeah, I took that piece too far." But Dion's so quick with it that, he's only, building themselves up.
Hmm.
But here's my final thoughts on that. Jackson State didn't win the SWAC, and Alabama didn't win the national championship, and Texas A&M couldn't even get to the show. So why don't we
Shut
win
up and
something?
play.
Why don't we win something?
Yeah,
And that's how I'm going to end it. Quit your
yeah,
crying, all of you.
exactly.
You still got to go play. So go play,
Yeah.
and we'll be right back on the Odd Coaches Podcast.
Why should student athletes use the CKA SAVE Project academic and athletic consulting services? Over the past 15 to 20 years, colleges, universities, professional sports teams, business organizations, and others have increased their use of consulting services to improve their decision-making processes and results. Over the same time, the athletic and academic landscape has changed for high school and college student athletes as the NCAA has raised initial academic eligibility requirements for student athletes while decreasing the number of transfer restrictions. Former college student athletes have noted that they were academic and athletically unprepared for the rigors of college. Let the CKA SAVE Project's close to 30 years of academic and athletic experience help guide student athletes to increase success as we work to help student athletes achieve the goal of obtaining a college degree. For more information, contact Dr. Keith Adams by email at cka@ckasaveproject.org.
Welcome back to the Odd Coaches Podcast. In segment 2, we're going to talk about some big changes and how certain teams have jumped on those changes. So the big change, the NCAA Division I Council announced that it will relax restrictions on college football conference championship games, allowing conferences to determine the teams that would participate in their respective title games. The decision paves the way for conferences to avoid having title game matchups determined by division winners, as well as possibly eliminating divisions altogether. First team jumped on that sucker, Pac-12. Pac-12 said minutes afterwards that starting in 2022, the conference title game would feature the teams with the two highest winning percentages, not records, winning percentages. Our goal is to place the two best teams in the Pac-12 championship game, and that's from the commissioner George Klieroff.
Still the
Um,
Pac-12.
and still the Pac-12. So although the Pac-12 released its conference schedule based on two divisions, um, the scheduling scenarios beyond will continue to be reviewed. Second team jumped on. Mountain West Conference will eliminate divisions starting in 2023, putting the two best teams with the highest winners percentages against each other. And then last week we heard that the ACC is looking at 3-5-5 scheduling, three permanent rivals, and then rotating the remaining five teams. So what do you think about that, Coach? Did you want the divisions or do you want
I
the
just
two
want people.
best?
Can we win first? Because you're talking about three conferences that ain't really others outside of Clemson ain't really in the national picture at all. Anyway, it's one team in all three conferences that's been in position to be national championship teams in the last 5 to 10 years.
Correct.
You can put your three best teams together, let them play for it, but it ain't make a difference when it comes to the national championship. And that guy who I used to, really admire over in Tuscaloosa, he had a lot to say about who was winning national championships. But man, I'm thinking about putting him on the same uh that same list as that dude down in Clemson.
All right. So they're also changing scholarships, my friend.
Hmm.
The NCAA Division One Council announced that it is waiving the initial counter scholarship limits for 2 years within Division One football. Previously, teams have been limited to 25 initial counters or scholarship spots per year from high school prospects and transfers. Even if programs are under the 85 total scholarship limit, if they have reached the annual 25 limit, they cannot sign any more scholarship players. With the increase in popularity of the transfer portal, the council announced in October that it approved a 1 year waiver to allow teams to go over the 25 limit cap, up to 7 scholarships to replace players lost to transfer. In theory, a program could have gone up to 32 players if they lost 7 players in the transfer portal. So let's talk about the why behind the what. Staying under the 25 limit scholarship limit, while also filling a complete roster of 85 players, have become difficult for coaches who keep losing players. The transfer environment changed the way programs recruit high school prospects. Schools are continuously bringing in college transfers through the portal, and those players count against 25 limit. Thus, we don't have any scholarships for the high school players. And in many instances, those transfers decrease the number of scholarships available to high school prospects, despite the fact that the program may still be under the 85 total limit. This waiver will allow programs more flexibility over the next 2 academic years to fill rosters and use scholarships how they deem fit. Mike, what say you? Because you can see why they're making the changes.
Of course, so that's 25 high school kids they can bring in, not counting transfer portal kids, right?
There's more, however they want to use them is however they want to use them. They
So
can bring in more college kids. It
that's
was more about the number.
yeah. So I would be more agreeable to a expanding the amount of high school seniors or prep school, whatever kids coming from the high school level and the junior college level. I would expand the number, or maybe add the number. Say, okay, you're allowed. The JUCO numbers won't count against your 25, and the high school won't count against your 25 up to a certain point. Does that make sense? That's
Yes,
to
but
combat the portal, because the portal gonna be crazy. Because then after that, I'm honest. You honest. We both coaches. You're gonna take a high school kid over a kid who went to a school, maybe redshirted. Who knows what happened? But he gets a transfer. He's been away from home for a year. He's lived on his own. He's more mature. I ain't got to deal with his like freshman mistakes or outbursts or whatever. And he's had that college life. He's got credits. He's already ahead of the game. If he's academically eligible, if he's made progress, he's ahead of the game. I'm gonna get a fifth year out of him.
yeah, the thing with this for me, it allows flexibility to do whatever you want to do. And um, I don't know how individual schools book it, but if it's me, um, I think I might start allocating. And you tell me if I'm crazy. I want a certain percentage of high schools. I want a certain
Yes,
percentage of this. And I want a
that's the
certain
number.
in terms of how I do
Recruiting,
it
right?
at State U.
Yeah.
And if this is my staff, that's how I'm looking at it. Because as a college coach, I always recruited 60% of what I recruited had to be program guys that are going to be there or anticipated to be there for
Hmm.
4 years because
Which they
that's the
call
heart and soul.
development now.
Yeah.
Yeah, whichever.
10%, I'm sorry, 20% were reaches and transformative players that if I get one of them, that's going to make us,
Good. Yeah.
better. And then 20% was developmental. But
Mhm.
60% of the guys I have to bring to campus, they got to be guys that I'm anticipating are going to be there for the duration. 20% go make that reach. And then 20%, let me see if I can make something out of this.
It's-
So, you might be, crazy. So that's how I got the 100%. So that's kind of how I was looking at it with that.
You
Any
always try
final
to
thought?
replace. I never wanted more than 50, 60%, 50% actually. I never wanted more than 60% of my roster be the guys that aren't coming back. So, like for instance, if other than my first year when I took over Essex, I had 15 kids. I had 14 freshmen and one sophomore. 14 freshmen, and out of the 14, nine of them didn't even turn 18 until after school started. So I had a very, very young team. But I knew at that point in time, from that point on, I went to get a point guard, a wing, and a post player
Mm-hmm.
that was either transferring, and then freshmen, I would definitely get the same thing. So I tried to keep where I'd have a core of six, and then six coming in that was training behind that six or seven to keep it, trying to keep it going in that manner. Like that was my goal as far as recruiting at the JUCO. I miss it the more I talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. So with that, as we close, one of the things that Coach Francis and I are going to talk about this summer is something we've mentioned on the show, so it's not breaking news, but we're really as CKA looking to get back into assisting on court, but we want to look at developmental 7, 8, 9, and we want to look at post grad, and we want to see what we can do. Because there is a need in the marketplace for coaches like ourselves to just try to help and then send them back to wherever they're going to be better. But we're both as coaches. We had outside folks come in and work with our players. It was how we were brought up in the business, and I don't know how much that is being done. But yeah, good segment. And when we come back, it will be a little more serious on the Coaches podcast. We're going to talk about conference revenue,
Mm.
and then we're going to talk about student mental health. So we're going to introduce how much conferences are making, and then we're going to talk about what actually is happening with student athletes, and maybe we can get some of that revenue to better help. We'll be right back on the Coaches podcast.
Dr. Keith Adams, president of the CKA Save Project's book, Finding the Balance, My Personal Journey to Academic and Athletic Success, is now available for purchase. The book serves as both a memoir of Dr. Adams' 30-year academic and athletic career, as well as an instructional guide to assist student athletes, parents, coaches, teachers, and administrators navigate through the challenges of finding a better balance between academic and athletic success. The book includes numerous personal stories and anecdotes from Dr. Adams, along with numerous former players and colleagues, including former George Mason standout Follering Campbell. You can order your copy at www.ckasaveproject.org. From the main page, simply click CKA Save Project Services and order the Find the Balance book. For more information, contact Dr. Keith Adams by email at cka@ckasaveproject.org.
Welcome back to the Odd Coaches podcast. And in segment 3, we are going to talk about conference tax season to start off with. So let me explain what that is. The ACC and the Pac-12 released their financial data for the 2020-2021 season. And most notably, the conference saw their revenues impacted in different ways during the coronavirus pandemic. While the ACC's 990 form shows a total revenue was $578.3 million, the highest grossing revenue in league history during a global pandemic, Mike. The Pac-12 reported revenues of $344 million, down 36% over the previous year. And as you saw in the previous segment, we're going to try to get those best two teams that we can into that college football playoff, and we're going to try to get some of that money back. So the ACC saw during a pandemic 16.4 increase in revenue compared to 2019-2020, and distributed an average of $36.1 million per school. I'm going to say that again, fans.
Go ahead.
The ACC saw a 16.4% increase in revenue compared to the previous season, the largest growth with the current membership, and distributed to each school $36.1 million. The Pac 12 reported an average distribution of $19.8 million per school, a decrease in 41% over the previous years. Okay.
Mhm.
And here's the thing that I want to make sure our audience understands. In a statement, the Pac-12 attributed those numbers primarily to decreased media rights and postseason bowl revenues, game cancellations, lower event revenue due to no fans, and higher costs associated with COVID health and safety protocols. Um, so let's go down to the SEC. The SEC scheduled a 10-game conference season, saw its revenues increase. Uh, in February, the league announced $777.8 million in total revenue was divided among the 14 schools with an average of $54.6 million per school. And you want to know why Oklahoma and Texas are going to the SEC. Before I get to the Big Ten and Big 12, also helping the ACC was Notre Dame because they draw everywhere they go. And the USA Today obtained the tax returns for the Big 12 and the Big 10. Both conferences saw a decrease in their revenue. Big 10 reported $680 million in revenue, down $89 million, while the Big 12 reported $53 million less in revenue. Before we talk about student athlete mental health, Mike, any thoughts as we look at the actual dollar amounts?
It's crazy that the dollar amounts are so high, and you think about it, far as conference, and we go back to why aren't student athletes getting paid, and name, image, likeness. It's unbelievable where the money is. That's the thing. They never look at the money. And when you present this to the public, this is the part they never see. And I'm sure the conferences go far and beyond to make sure that this doesn't even come to light in most places, and people refuse to look at what it's really about. Did Are they filing for some kind of like COVID relief?
I do
Could they
not
get a
know.
PPP loan? I'm saying,
They are a nonprofit,
uh,
and nonprofits
well, they get
uh,
to write that off then, right?
they do.
Okay.
Um, so the reason why this topic made me think about student athlete mental health is multiple fold. Dr. Lisa Rubin came on with us a few weeks ago on the Find a Balance Friday episode, and we had this conversation. Naturally, we were naturally talking about it. And one of the things that was mentioned was the fact that athletes were on campus as well as student athlete support people on campus during the pandemic. Um, in addition, the Washington Post recently ran an article about student mental health and a rash of suicides that have taken place. And three, both Mike and I work in student support. We work to help kids every day, not just student athletes. And we have both seen the impact of COVID and the continuing impact. So I appreciate my partner giving us this time to really dive into this. And I hope people clip this portion of the episode and have their own conversations. So let's talk about student athlete mental health. At least 5 college athletes have died by suicide in recent months. And again, most of this is coming from the article in the Washington Post recently, sparking calls for more support from the NCAA. Current and college student athletes and advocates told the Washington Post they see that this is a moment as mental health crises for college athletes. Um, the pandemic has really exacerbated it. We've got the pandemic, we've got social media, we got rising pressure on young people, And this was shared by many college student athletes and experts. Uh, and this has kind of made some people angry, Mike.
Hmm.
So the NCAA released a statement in the article, and it said the NCAA said that it requires schools to provide mental health services to athletes and that it consulted extensively with experts to create best practices for care. Here's the quote: "The mental health crisis in this country touches every aspect of society, and the NCAA acknowledges the urgency and magnitude of the issue. We understand that mental health crisis has been exacerbated for student athletes and others by the isolations and other impacts of COVID 19. But here's the deal: athletes and advocates have pushed back against the ideas that deaths by suicide are simply a reflection of a wider and well documented mental health crisis among all young people. The challenges faced by athletes are sharply distinct from those faced by other college student athletes, many of which I discuss not only in my dissertation, but in the book Finding the Balance: My Personal Journey to Academic and Athletic Success. Between the relentless hours, the physical injuries, the limits on social circles that are confined to teams, and all of that can disappear with injury or poor performance. Mike, before we continue, any initial thoughts on the post article as well as the NCAA statement?
No, I think it's a serious situation. We need to devote more money into, far as mental health and stability for our student athletes who are doing more than just regular students. And we know students themselves, like when exam week come along and things like that, students themselves are having issues with, and all they're in the dorm. They go to class, they go to a library. Well, if you're an athlete, you're actually traveling to play a game. So how are you getting your work done when that plane get back late or that bus get back late? You might go somewhere and have a 3 hour bus ride, 4 hour bus ride, because we're trying to save money, of course. So you're gonna have that bus ride. So you studying on the bus. None the normal athletes or the normal students don't have to do that. So there's
Yeah,
things over the top that could cause more stresses for our student athletes, and we need to make sure that with the change in times and what we're concerned about, far as where we are as a society, we need to devote more time into suicide prevention for our student athletes.
yeah, and real life, and you've been in high schools a lot of years. We're taping this in the month of May. It's AP testing.
Hmm.
So the state, the county and the regional track meets and the state
Hmm.
track meets are going on in
Hmm.
the midst of AP testing. And kids got tests AP. And if you're an athlete, whether you're track or baseball or whatever
And this
spring
I
sport,
had four of them.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
you've got to deal with that. So think about it. I got to take an AP test, and then I got to go compete. For the chance to advance. Play.
Hmm.
It's hard.
Hmm.
Again, it's something you've decided to do,
I
and
had a
that's the
kid.
reality.
I had a kid who didn't show up to regionals last year because after his AP testing, he was so drained. He called me. He's like, "Coach, I just can't. I just can't." I said, "Okay." I had to call the regional director, and he forfeited. His first round game.
Yeah, real life is real. So going back to the article, the reality, the family members of one of the student athletes that committed suicide in recent months said that they believe the stress significantly to their child's death. And I quote, balancing athletics, academics, and the demands of everyday life overwhelm the student athlete in a single desperate moment. And that is so real. That is so real. Scholarship and spots on teams can hang on individual games, individual meets, coaches and athletic departments, uh, paid and funded based in part on how they perform. That's how they're paid. And unlike most student athletes, advocates say there's a $1 billion oversight body charged with guiding and protecting college athletics. The NCAA last convened with a formal task force on mental health in 2017. And although it did update best practices in 2020, critics say they haven't done enough. So I want to give you one example of that, and it's called the quote athlete tax. Uh, Pietro Sasso, who's an assistant professor at Stephen F. Austin University in Texas, who has studied mental health, in college sports calls it an athletic tax. College sports have such compressed schedules. Their demands don't let them get access in the same way other students have access to. And college athletes experience mental health struggles at the same rate or higher than the typical college student athlete. Um, and it's just tough. So, any reactions to that piece, sir? The athlete tax.
No, sir. It's just really, again, as said previously, my previous comment, we have to redirect what we're doing for these student athletes.
Yes, and it's not just athletes. Dan Romer, the research director at the Annenberg Public Policy Center at the University of Pennsylvania, pushed back against the idea that there was just a crisis with athletes, arguing that the mental health care is broken across colleges as a whole. And it's not just the athletes. The real crisis is with the college and universities themselves. If students feel like they aren't going to get help, then many of them aren't going to seek help. And that statement from Mr. Romer kind of, stuck me close to the chest because that's our job every day
Hmm.
is to help. A lot of times, kids have come to both of us in our careers and said, I didn't talk to the teacher because I didn't think that it would do any good. I didn't do whatever because I didn't think it would do, any good. So, what's being done? Let's talk about what's being done. Um, an increasing focus on mental health in sports has led to more colleges, especially larger Division ones, to add mental health professionals to their staff. The NCAA's best practice guidelines released in 2016 calls for campuses to create interdisciplinary teams focused on mental health, including trained practitioners who are not simply performance coaches focused on-field showings. The organization recommends screening students for mental well-being as well as with physical health. And those go in line with the recommendations that I made in my dissertation as a recommendation to just add more staffing and professionals to it. New rules that give college athletes control over their name, image, and likeness is also adding to the stress and the anxiety. And Mike, I don't know if you knew this story, but Sedona Prince, who started all of this with the NCAA tournament, men's and women's basketball tournament, she's big on TikTok and social media. And she's describing how her growing fame among her classmates led her to take a break from social media. She says, and I quote, I'm not any different because I'm on TikTok. I'm still a person. And my mental health has really been declining for a long time to the point where I'm at my lowest now. So she's taken, a break from social media. So it's really important to find a balance. Mike, she's on TikTok. She's doing what kids do now, and the internet's mean. I know your son deals with just vitriol, hate, and it's like, what are we doing? I'm living my best life, and y'all mad at what? What are we mad at? And this kid is just that young adult, and she had to step away. So it was so bad that for her sanity, she stepped away from that. Any thoughts about Sedona Price before we kind of talk and kind of wrap this up?
Yeah, it's not good. Like it's social media has brought out people. I'm not gonna say made them that way. They always were that way. They just maybe not had an avenue to express it or the autonomy to do things in the secrecy because they can hide behind whatever they want. They could take any picture in the world, put it up, put any name, and be the evilest person in the world and the biggest of cowards. I remember the first time we were introduced to Twitter and some guy said something to my son and literally the guys who I grew up with, like the AJ called me and said, Dad, Junior Jones just left. I was like, what you mean? Like my guys drove to campus. Them dudes, the dudes took a ride. They, saw all this stuff on Twitter and everything. They took a ride to check on him. They was like, "You need anything, AJ? You all right?" This. He was like, "No, it's just Twitter." Like, really, like, seriously, guys, like, the van with the tinted windows drove over to College Park, to check on him. AJ called me. He's like, "Dad, Junior Jones just left here." I was like, "What you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, they came to check on me." See, a lot of people say a lot of things, but they don't realize people don't play them games. You can't mistreat. It's so much hate in the world. Like,
yes,
too much hate. Like, you can't get mad because somebody doing something different, or the jealousy or whatever. But we can't let that happen. I mean, we've let it happen so far. But I feel bad for student athletes for that extra scrutiny, especially after he was voted, his freshman year, he was voted as one of the top 15 sports people to follow on Twitter. That was a national, like, sophomore year, after his sophomore year. He was voted by USA Today or something as one of the top 15 athletes you should follow on Twitter.
Well, and he is a great follow, folks. So please check him out. But to close this, two things. One, we want to help. CKA Save Project wants to help. Finding the balance is not just a book or a slogan with us. It's real life. Even in my personal life and many of the personal lives of the people who work with us, we've had to step back and reassess and reevaluate and get off the boat, as we mentioned in the episode with Ajwa, and make it better for us. So let's continue to work to find a healthy work, school, life balance. So CKA offers academic and athletic consulting, academic monitoring, as well as workshops on time management, organizational, and self-advocacy skills. And if you're interested in anything that we do, just like on the end, just email us at ckasaveproject.org, and we'll schedule a Zoom meeting and just have that conversation. But to close, Mike, I do want to formally mention the U.S. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So if you or anyone you may know may be struggling with suicidal thoughts, you can call the U.S. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-TALK. That's 800-273-8255 anytime, day or night. Crisis text line is also available 24/7 with confidential support via text messaging. That is dial 741-741. Again, that's 741-741. And our super producer, Kelly, will put that information on the screen. Mike, I'd allow you the opportunity to say goodbye to our audience if you had any last words before we wrap up.
Yes, make sure you check in on those people who are the strongest or feel like they're the strongest or you see as the strongest. Make sure that you are communicating with those people in your family who seem to do the most or who are the most responsible, because those people are the ones who are also suffering. They just hide it better, and they keep busy enough to not really have to look into things, but they struggle through things too. So,
all right. Thank you, sir, for letting us have this conversation. And on behalf of my tag team partner, Coach Mike Francis, I am Dr. Keith Adams, saying thank you for listening and or watching the Odd Coaches podcast. And we will see you on the sidelines. Till next time, take care.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. The Odd Coaches podcast drops new episodes every Tuesday through Friday on most weeks. Make sure you subscribe to the Odd Coaches podcast on Apple Music, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow the Odd Coaches podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Odd Coaches. Follow Dr. Adams on Twitter and Instagram at CKA Save Project. In addition, follow Coach Mike Francis on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Franchise, spelled Coach Franchize. For more information about the CKA Save Project, please visit them on the web at www.ckasaveproject.org. See you next time on the Odd Coaches Podcast.